Good morning, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to the CharIN Tuesday session today for the Indian market. We are very happy to have all of you here. We hope that this event will be helpful for you in terms of your development process for either the vehicles or for the chargers or even components. Please feel free to take this as an interactive session. We welcome your questions, your comments, and we will put them to the panel, assuming that we have the time to cover all of them. If we have not covered any of this, you're welcome to send us an email on this. We will take care of it offline. Thank you. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, these are our panelists. We have Prashant K. Banerjee from Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers. We have Dr. Jabesh Dinagar from TVS Motor Company, Jörg Heuer from Dr. Jörg Heuer from EcoG, Satish Machani from ACMA. He is the managing director of Stump Schuler and Somapa. He's representing ACMA here. We have Srija Nair from Mahindra Electric Mobility, as well as Marius Hochel from PDA. Thank you all for joining us. We'd like to get into the next speech. Next slide, please. I'd like to request Michael Keller from the CharIN board to give the welcome address. Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to have you all here for this CharIN Tuesday with several speeches from different type of different area of the global world, and the mobility is a global journey we are all on. And I wish you all very good success for the conference today, and for all of you all the best and good health for your further time. And yeah, thank you for joining, and now all the best. And please, next one, please.
I was on mute. Thank you, Michael. Can we have the next slide, please? I'd like to welcome Marius Hochel from the VDA to talk about the German view on electric mobility and Indo-German cooperation. Marius, the floor is yours.
Yes, am I audible? I think so, right?
Yes, you are.
Great. Dear Sivam, dear Mr. Keller, dear Mr. Mahani, dear Mr. Banerjee, dear participants, dear friends and colleagues from India and Germany and all over the world. First of all, I really hope that all of you are doing safe, and thanks very much to Sivam for organizing this webinar and giving us the opportunity to speak from VDA. And I really hope that your families are safe, and all the colleagues in India. It's very shocking news right now we get, but yeah, our prayers and thoughts are with India. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Maybe we start with the first slide. Yes, perfectly. So VDA comprises about 600 members, be it the very big ones, as for example, Daimler, Audi, BMW, the suppliers like Bosch, Schaeffler, for example, but also small suppliers are part of VDA, and we just counted our locations in India. So our members have more than 130 production facilities in India, which shows a very strong commitment to our friends in the Indian market. So the next slide, please. Since 2017, we are having a special association partnership with ACMA and SIAM, and between the Ministry of Heavy Industries and the Federal Ministry of Transport and Digital Infrastructure. We have a very strong collaboration in the so-called Indo-German Working Group on automotive, where a lot of topics like this, for example, arise, and some ideas about joint webinars and so on. I'm coming to the next slide, please. So why we are here today, we are all in the future facing challenges which we have aligned in the VDA, which is, for example, the population growth, urbanization, megacities. I think I don't need to explain the colleagues joining here from India about megacities and urbanization. But this brings us to somehow the solution would be alternative power, automation, new services, and connectivity. And for sure, if we speak about alternative power, it's very important to keep in mind the electric mobility as well. So please go to the next slide. And therefore, these 6 pillars will keep our positive outlook for the e-mobility. So we see in the future, we see rising oil costs, we see the demand for decarbonization, and we see that the range for the battery will go up, and the cost probably for the powertrain will, due to increasing economies of scale, will go down. And hence we see that the market penetration right now gets more and more positive. So in the next slide, you can see the overall car market. In 2020, we had a slump of a historic dimension, but for 2021, it's already, the outlook is a little positive by an increase of 9%. Coming to the next slide, which is very important. Basically, this is run by the Chinese market, which is now already back to the pre-corona levels, as you can see here on the right. But also India has the sharpest rise of emerging countries, as you can see here on the left. Coming to the next slide, which is very interesting because we also see, we every time see China as a very good e-mobility country, but basically the EU was the world leader for e-mobility in 2020. But China already had a very, very dynamic start into 2021. Coming to the next slide. In Germany, very interesting, the share of electric vehicles, and that's very important. It includes the plug-in hybrid car as well as the battery electric car, is roughly 21%, whereas in the whole European Union it's 13%, and in China it's roughly 9%. Coming to the next slide, please. What is very interesting that German OEMs offer a huge variety of electric cars. As you can see here, we are in most of the markets, we have more than about 70, 60 models available for the market. So it's a very high share of German models, which can be bought by the customer. Coming to the next slide. Very interesting here that in most markets, the e-market share of German brands is in the same order as the market share over the car market in total. So you see that German brands are selling, like having a market range of 20%, and this is the same for the electric cars as well. So I would say that the German model and the German brands are already quite successful. Coming to the next slide, please. We see here that the cumulative new registrations are now around 845,000 cars in Germany. And we have, out of this, 51% battery electric cars and 49% plug-in hybrid cars. This is very interesting because we still see the plug-in as a very good bridge technology, which will also probably in the future still account for 30% of the electric car sales. Very interesting is that the ramp up was supported by an environmental bonus, which applies for BEVs and plug-in hybrids. And this environmental bonus, it comes from the German government, and there were finally last year 550,000 applications for that. Next slide, please. From VDA side, it's very interesting that the so the challenge when it comes to electric mobility is for us, there's a huge variety, but it's very important maybe also for India is the training and qualification and the charging infrastructure at the end, because there will be a lot of different maintenance be required for electric cars to maintenance, and yeah, this has to be taken into account in the future. Coming to the next slide. From VDA side, the CCS system is as a charging standard recommended, as this as a global standard guarantees accessibility and secures investment. So with the next and final slide, we have just summed up with our electric mobility some colleagues, some key recommendations for electric mobility, which I would like to point out. So first of all, regarding framework conditions for electric mobility, we recall for higher planning reliability. Clarity in policies is one of the most important points. Stability of regulatory regime, especially around electrification, is of crucial importance. With regards to standardization of electric mobility, we would like to express our concern that all regulations shall be as internationally harmonized as possible. International standards bring more than 10 years of experience into account. Don't waste time on reinventing already existing things. Concentrate on the car as a product and the customer as a user. The second one is that incentives from the government are important to promote the adoption of electric vehicles, as well for the purchases of electric cars, as well as for the infrastructure. Customers need to be supported in their decision to move to electric cars, as it still has some constraints compared to the internal combustion engine. And third, international standardization provides investment incentives. As soon as the EU and Germany decided for CCS as a mandatory charging standard, the industry has a clear signal how to invest. As long as discussion is open, the investors will balance their decision. Doubts are the dangers of the future. And now coming to the next slide, please. Okay, Then for just one final, two final remarks. Important for India is that to include the PHEVs and the as well, and maybe also included in the incentivization scheme under the FAME scheme 2 to give OEMs the possibility to provide their BF and PHEV portfolio to the Indian market on a higher base. So as I told, VDA still sees the PHEV technology as a bridge technology. And finally, for India and Germany, access to international markets is an essential and strategic asset. Trade and cooperation will lead to economic development and will lead to a win-win situation for both countries. Tariff increases, as announced recently, do not support trade. As India wants to increase its exports, both sides have to be seen. One-sided tariff increases may lead in a loss for all. And finally, I would really highlight our cooperation with our Indian sister associations, SIAM and ECMA, and with the CharIN team. So we organized in 2018 and 2019 two huge physical conferences in New Delhi. So it's our first time to go now to go online now. So I hope that you like the program. And finally, I would like to invite you to the IAA Mobility, which the VDA is organizing in September. So there might also be a hybrid alternative. Let's hear how this vaccination program and so on is going. So I would kindly like to invite you all. And with this, I would like to close and thank you very much for your attention and your time today. And there is our contact, so you may reach out to us. And I think the slides will be shared as well afterwards, so you can check the numbers in detail, which I haven't got the time to go through every single number. So thanks, Sivam, and back to you. You are muted, I think.
Right, I was muted. Thank you, Marius. You made some interesting points on PHEVs also. Can I ask you to join for the question answer session, the panel discussion, so that we can have some questions on that also? Right.
Yes.
Thank you for the points. Can you have the next slide, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Satish Machani from the ACMA Association to give his speech. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shivam. I thank you also for accommodating this change. As we all know, these are unprecedented times. But nevertheless, I would like to wish everybody a good afternoon, good morning to people in India. I wish you all are also safe as well as the world continues to battle this terrible pandemic. But I'm very confident within a short time, all this will be history, and we go back to living our lives normally the way we would all like to. It's a privilege for me to be here at this session. I'm very thankful to VDA, with whom we have been working as ACMA over the last couple of decades to promote partnerships collaborations between the Indian and European auto component industry. We've been working with VDA on many initiatives. One of them is the ACMA-CM VDA partnership program as well. VDA also is supporting us on several programs at the ACMA Center of Excellence. Let me briefly update the forum on about ACMA. We have a membership base of over 800 companies, and our primary charter is to develop a globally competitive Indian auto component industry and strengthen its role in national economic development, as well as to promote business through its international alliances. Very brief about our industry. We registered a sales of over US $50 billion, with exports of over $15 billion in the year 1920, and registered a CAGR of 8% over a period of 6 years. Of course, in the backdrop of pandemic and the lockdown, the auto industry faced unprecedented disruptions in the first half of fiscal year in India. But despite that, through our agility and flexibility, we have displayed remarkable resilience and come back strongly after the unlocking of the economy took place. Of course, we are now facing the second wave, but that too, we are confident as a country, we are very resilient, and I'm sure within the next couple of months, we'll be back to our growth path, and the growth should be sustained. I'm also happy to mention that the government of India has been very supportive to the cause of Indian auto industry, and the cabinet has approved very aggressive production-linked incentive schemes for 10 sectors, out of which our sector, the auto and our component sector, is one of the primary focus. Very brief about the EV industry in our country. The Indian government announced national mission for electric mobility in the year 2013, which was followed by announcement of FAME 1 scheme in 2015. This was valid till March 2019, with an outlay of roughly 530 billion Indian rupees. In April 2019, the FAME 2 was announced with an outlay of approximately 100 billion rupees, along with tax reduction of 5% on EVs and electric chargers. It came with PMP, as we call it, the phased manufacturing program. As we all know, that scheme is now over, and it's in the interest of suppliers to show the capabilities in manufacturing components in-house, so that we are less dependent on imports going forward. The cabinet has recently approved the PLI schemes, as I just mentioned before, and our sector is one of the primary focus sector. We should get roughly 57,000 crore rupees as incentives, out of which 18,000 crores approximately has been allocated for 5 years for advanced chemistry cell battery alone. So this ACC battery manufacturing represents one of the largest economic opportunities on many parts, such as consumer electronics, renewable energy, and so on and so forth. On the EV sales, despite the fact that we have had a very tough year last year, India registered a growth of 20%, albeit a small percentage of the overall sales, but still, definitely the acceptance is becoming an increasing trend, as it is demonstrated in the rest of the world as well. A little bit more about us as a body. We have ACMA have a pillar structure, and in pillar 1, the business development, we have a sub pillar for EV and future mobility. The primary objective of our pillar is to support members in exploring new opportunities with OEMs, tier 1s, startups, and other stakeholders for the emerging technologies. We also like to promote and adopt innovation, sustainable technologies such as connected infotainment, green mobility, etc. We also organize delegations, conferences, expos to create larger awareness in the industry. We also interface very actively with the government and other stakeholders for policy formation and creation of roadmap, etc. We frequently create workshops to create awareness in this electrification endeavor. We also like to enhance localization of EV components by meeting the OEMs and the tier 1s. Under this sub-pillar also, we are part of various forums with the BIS for regulations, along with the other membership. We do regular interactions with CM and other members to represent EV at their forums. The DPIIT, the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, under the leadership of Mr. Piyush Goyal, our Honorable Minister for Commerce, Industry and Railways, has identified electric vehicle components and integrated circuits as one of the key sectors for promotion and localization and exports. ACMA and CIAM have been co-opted in the core group of CII under the chairmanship of Dr. Pawan Goenka to take this forward with our government. We have also created a compendium of EV component manufacturers and shared it with our customers. We also have done and continue to make technology and matchmaking. We focus on various opportunities. We invite global companies to partner with India, where EV is one of the focus areas. We had one such session in February of this year. We do a lot of interactions with OEMs to address their demands and of their components. I would also like to highlight that to keep the focus on the objective of sub-pillar, we are planning a next-gen mobility conference, an exhibition to create the ecosystem for the next-gen mobility. This will happen in the near future. With this, I would like to conclude my speech. And on behalf of ACMA, I once again thank VDA, CIAM, CharIN, and other members of other industries that are present here for this very useful session. And I hope all the success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Satish sir will not be joining us for the Q&A session. So if any of the participants have questions, I'd like to request he'll have a couple of minutes to answer them. But let me start the ball off by rolling Satish sir a question. Is there anything from CharIN that we can do to ease the development process for ACMA members? It's a broad question, but we welcome suggestions from ACMA to take it forward. We'd like to have a discussion with members who are interested. We'd like to see what we can offer. Any particular points that you'd like to, sir?
Shivam, I would like to highlight, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please.
I would like to highlight that the biggest challenge will come from the standardization process, right? We as ACMA have been actively involved with BIS at various levels, and I think there needs to be a stronger representation from bodies such as yours in such forums. And as I was talking to you offline, you know, yes, there are various sessions that we have on a constant basis, where I would like to invite you in one of those forums, so you can put forward your thought process as well, which will help us in quicker and faster standardization. The other thing also, Shivam, is the challenge is going to be on the cost front. You know, as you know, the fastest adoption of electrification is possibly going to happen in the two-wheeler segment, as you say. You know, 80%, 85% of our market right now is basically two-wheelers in the electrification industry. Roughly about 150,000 motorcycles / scooters have been sold last year. That's all been basically. So here again, there are a lot of challenges. I think more constant engagement with the OEMs in how this protocol can be made cost-effective. I think these are the primary challenges that we face. And with that regard, as an ACMA representative, I would be in touch with you to see how we can facilitate in ease of adoption.
Done, sir. Thank you very much. Can we have the next slide, please? Now I'd like to welcome Prashant Banerjee from the Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers to give his speech. PKB, sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shivam. On behalf of Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers, good morning to all my friends in Europe, good afternoon to Indian friends, and good evening as applicable to other Occidental Zone participants. It's my privilege, honor, and I'm very thankful to VDA in general and CharIN in particular for giving Sam an opportunity to speak in this important deliberations, discussions. Actually, the pioneer in ushering us in the electrification, standardization and electrification discussion related to charging infrastructure way back in 2017. And I have few slides to present. So Shivam, is it possible for the organizer to just pass those slides? So why e-mobility in India? So as already Maurice indicated, the drivers are enablers for e-mobility proliferation in India, in globe. But in Indian context, our priorities are very simple. It's efficient mobility. It's a climate change commitment of Government of India on GHG reduction. And of course, we have a local pollution mitigation of cities. 14 Indian cities actually featured in out of the 15 most polluted cities in the world. So the urgency is obviously very clear. And when it comes to energy security and net import, India is importing 80% of its crude requirement from abroad. So therefore, energy security point of view also actually electrification features an important area. So next slide, please. Is it already in? Next slide. Yeah, okay. E-mobility in India. If you look at a 360-degree view, then obviously, in our federal structure, we have central government and state governments. And at the same time, the central policies and state policies, because transport is in a concurrent list of our constitution, they have the very independent jurisdictions and roles to play. So therefore, in any e-mobility discussion, central and state governments' roles are very important. And also when it comes to standardization, regulations, and charging infrastructure or component standard, discussion, we have a very clearly defined Bureau of Indian Standards Committees, ETD 51 and ETD 27, which takes this discussion forward. And as you know that present government is highly focused on self-reliant India, and they would not like to miss the bus of transformation in electric mobility in India. So therefore, there are number of schemes are coming up in the form of phased manufacturing plan, and also what kind of duty reductions to happen over a period of time. And now a new scheme, which is a production linked incentive, which has been already talked about by previous speaker. So basically, this scheme of things are very important, 360-degree views, and Government of India is seized of the requirement. Next slide, please.
Yes, sir. The next slide is up.
Yeah, just
Policies in action.
So basically, when it comes to policy in action and at center, then obviously same faster adoption of manufacturing of electric vehicles. A mission program was launched by Government of India, and FAME 1 scheme was introduced, and subsequently that was bolstered by FAME 2 scheme. And as I mentioned that Ministry of Power is dealing with the charging infrastructure guidelines, and of course power has been provided as a service for electrification, so that has also bring much desired clarity as far as urban design guidelines for providing the every household in building areas, parking areas, what kind of charging infrastructures will be provided. That clarity has been brought in by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. As far as the promotion of electrification goes, phased manufacturing program has been brought in by the Heavy Industry Ministry, and then reduction of the duty exemptions for. Okay, so basically also state governments have allowed exemptions of permits and registrations to promote electrification of mobility, and that is the domain responsibility of Road Transport Ministry. So they have done it. Next slide, please, Shivam. Next slide. Thank you. So when it comes to, as I mentioned about the FAME scheme, initially the allocation was 0.1 billion US dollar in FAME 1 scheme, but which was increased to substantial level, 1.4 billion US dollar in FAME 2 scheme. And if you look at the bifurcation of this, huge fund allocation, it's basically to promote demand creation, and then charging infrastructure, followed by technology adoption and pilot projects, and some related to information, education, communication activities, and it's for operations. And the target number of vehicles which are targeted in same scheme is two-wheelers 1 million, and three-wheelers 500,000, and cars 55,000, and buses 7,000. So these are the very, very aggressive scheme Government of India brought in. Next slide, please. But however, because of multiple reasons, A, because of COVID, B, because of the kind of qualification criteria was put in, the numbers have not actually picked up. So if you look at the number as against the million two-wheelers planned, the numbers are abysmally low actually. So we are just wondering that what are the reasons why actually the scheme could not generate as many volumes as it was envisaged in the original scheme. There are multiple reasons, but there is a need to understand the customer psyche as well, and of course the battery cost and other technology options. Next please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide please.
Next slide is up, sir. Can you see it? Policies in action in Indian states.
Yes, and now I can see that.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So basically, policies in actions, as I mentioned, that there are a number of states and different states have their different policies. Every state has tried to prioritize their requirements. Some on the focus on manufacturing, some on demand creation, some has thought to create initial numbers. So for example, in Delhi has come out very aggressively. The 50% of buses in public transport by 2023. Pollution cess on petrol and diesel starting from April 2019 has already been done. There are states like Maharashtra. They are looking for a very high number of EV penetration, and around 25,000 crore investment in EV and related infrastructure being envisaged. Some states have gone for job creation as a priority through EV. Similarly, in Telangana, you see the attractive investment worth $3 billion is being created with 50,000 jobs by 2022. Innovation funds by the government to support EV innovative projects. So like that, there are different states interventions are there. Next slide, Shivam.
Yes, sir. Next slide is up now. You should see it in a couple of seconds.
Yeah. There's a bit of lag in my internet, I think.
Not a problem, sir.
So basically, when it comes to charging infrastructure, as I mentioned, CharIN has been supporting various policy discussion on standardization of charging infrastructure right from 2017 and 18. But as you know that the charging standard discussion has different divergent views. In 2018, almost we converged to impress upon the Ministry of Road Transport that CCS standards could be a good way for India, but somehow that mandate could not happen. People recognize that CCS standardization approach is good, but still people continue to discuss different options. So if you look at this slide, basically, we are dividing into private charging and public charging. In public charging also, as you know, India is a having a mobility requirement with the extraordinary frugal engineering ideas. So therefore, we have low voltage EVs, less than 120 volt, and high voltage EVs. And within the low voltage and high voltage EVs, we have AC/DC. And we started with Indian, three-wheeler and two-wheeler requirements, particularly the e-rickshaw requirements. So that's how the AC chargers were Bharat EV charger AC 001 was created as the first standard activity, and subsequently the part of the same standard we created the DC 001 Bharat EV charger was created, and that was one for 48 volt, other one for 72 volt. But primarily, if you look at the popularity, then AC charger continue to dominate at this point in time. And when it comes to high voltage EV chargers, the standards have already, we have a ETD 51 committee under Bureau of Indian Standards, which is chaired by Sajid Mubashir, and of course we have panelists also here who are working as a panel conveners of some of the standard making body. There we have a IEC standard 62196, and of course the DC CCS CHAdeMO standards are there. So we are hopeful that India will have multiple options, but majority standards of mobility is copied from Europe. So we hope that in charging infrastructure also we will have a dominance of CCS in our mobility requirements. Next slide.
Yes, sir. The next
so
slide.
When it comes to collaboration between VDA and SIAM, so German collaboration with Indian automobile industry is the time immemorial, when it started pre-independence time with the German company joining hands with the Indian company. So SIAM VDA collaboration goes a long way. We have also collaboration with SIAM, Korean automobile manufacturers, and same is Japanese. But with VDA, we have a number of collaborations which are standing as a testimony of our dependence on each other. And we are very proud to say that, as Maurice indicated, we have an Indo-German dialogue, which is a yearly dialogue which happens alternately here in Germany. Also, we have a multiple technology collaboration platform. Next slide, Maurice. Shivam. So basically, we have a multiple platform of collaboration where ACMA, SIAM, and VDA, we do collaborate with each other. With CharIN also, we do have in the past exchange of information. This is one of the exchange of information which is happening today. We will continue to happen in future. So as Maurice mentioned about IA mobility, so we do have India Day also, and Indo-German working group is also there, which regularly discuss on electrification and charging related mobility needs. And then at World Forum, we have WP29 where we collaborate. We have a cooperation on best practices. We have cooperations on quality circles. We have cooperation on various important subjects of sustainability, recycling, and circular economy. And also we have a global trade needs, technology exchange, and regular cooperation. So we are very proud that SIAM VDA collaboration is going stronger and stronger with the passage of time, and we look forward for fruitful interactions on this charging infrastructure also. So through CharIN and through VDA, we'll be happy to have electric mobility discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
that
you,
was very helpful.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one. PKB sir will not be joining us for the Q&A session. So let me just ask one question that comes up regularly. Okay. We have a lot of variety of options when it comes to charging. Now, from the CharIN side, of course, we'd like it to move towards one direction. That's separate. But is there any specific advice that you can give OEMs or ACMA with regards to figuring out the charging issue, or perhaps some insights into what the government is planning with regards to charging? Any observations would be helpful, sir, for the audience.
No, I think we recognize the importance of having a standard charging infrastructure mandate from the side of the government. Okay. But at the same time, as the electrification is evolving, we recognize that for some time, maybe a year or two, we will allow less than 120 volt systems to exist in the electrification. But then we recognized and said that okay, we will stop that, and then we will have a standard CCS 2 options going forward for vehicles as it matures, the market matures. And I think we have recognized that. So we are hopeful that we will eventually move towards CCS standardization, and BIS committees are also working towards that. But as far as the three-wheeler and two-wheeler goes, because our 81% of the vehicle are actually two-wheelers, so there we need to have our unique set of requirement on which the Indian OEMs are working along with standard making body, and we are hopeful that something relevant to India will come.
Done, sir. Thank you very much for joining, sir. Thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes. Now I'd like to welcome Srija Nair from Mahindra Electric Mobility to give his speech on the EV parkway infrastructure that Mahindra is developing along with other panel members at BIS. Srija?
Yeah.
The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So good afternoon for all in India and good morning for all in Europe. So let's move a little fast because I'll be covering a lot of things out here. So can we go to the next slide? Next. Yes. So today we will be covering Indian standards. What are the latest developments? What are published? What are the standards which are published? And what are yet to get published? And then with that, we will move into what are the committees which are specifically working on the various aspects of the standardization. Then we will touch upon what is the EV parkway charge point, its use cases, and outline of the approach paper of parkway charge point, and what are the key stakeholders who are affected by the parkway charge point standardization, and charge point configurations, and specific help which are required from the CharIN community. Next slide. Yeah, so far we have published the standards. There is actually IS 17017-1, which is equivalent to IEC 61851-1, and 2122 are similar to IEC 61851-1 21 and 22, and equivalent to ISO 15118 series, we have IS 15118, which is the digital communication for EV charging using PLC and wireless systems. Then 62196 series are adopted as IS 17017-2 series, and type 2 connector is standardized through -2, and CHAdeMO and CCS connectors are standardized through -3. Then planned standardization which are right now in circulation are -23 and -23-1. 23-1 is for panograph, and 24 is the digital communication for EV DC charging, CAN based, which is covering CHAdeMO. And then there are battery swapping standard, light EV DC charging standard, which is specifically charging connector, which is specifically for India. It is a derivative of 61851-25, and then we have light EV AC charge point and AC plus DC charge point, which are coming. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah. So there are 6 panels which are formed. LEV AC charge point, which is a simple industrial plug, and LEV DC charge point is coming out with AC plus DC charge point, most likely a type 2 socket which has a DD configuration, where the communication is a single line CAN or LIN is what they are thinking, but we are trying to align with PLC in the Park Bay charge point, and both the panels, panel 2 and panel 3, need to align in this. Then 61851-25, the connector used in DC charging is what would be coming for DC alone charging in the panel 2. In panel 3, which is Park Bay charge point, it is a socket defined for charging AC and DC up to 22 kilowatt. And I will give more details about this in the upcoming slides. Then panel 4 deals with HEV charging infrastructure. Panel 5 deals with the infrastructure backend. It is more or less aligned with OCPP 1.6 and OpenADR for the utility communication. Then coming to light EV battery swap, panel 6 is working on that particular thing, and heavy electric vehicle battery swap is also in the scope of HEV charging infrastructure, which is panel 4. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So in EV Park Bay charge point, we are defining a networked smart EVSE. So it connects the input supply, which is coming from the grid, to an output socket, which is able to deliver up to 22 kilowatt. And output socket is commonly accepted as a type 2 socket. For AC charging, it is a simple adoption of 61851-1 in type 2, 62196-2 in type 2 configuration. And then applicable cases, since it's an infrastructure socket, we have only case A and case B applicable. So it's not a wire attached to a frame, and hence case C is not applicable here. Nature of output is AC and DC. Either of these outputs can be provided in the configurations which I would be discussing further. Then communication between EV and EVSE. In case of DC and AC, both, we are intending to do bidirectional charging, bidirectional communication, whereby we can also enable in future V2G or V2H by onboard bidirectional OBC. So then coming to communication between EVSE and CMS, it is mostly OCPP 1.6, and panel 5 is working on that, and the job of this team is to align with that. Next slide. Yeah, so basically the use cases for these are to cover public charging infrastructure and apartments and independent households. So various stakeholders in the ecosystem needs to be aligned in this particular case. So basically a charge point owner should be very clear of what kind of utility supply they would get, whether they need to install the distribution transformer or the distribution company would install the distribution transformer. Then the kind of metering which he would get, and then what is the charge points which he need to install. Basically, it is an infrastructure socket which he need to install at the Park Bay. Then what kind of backend communications are required, how he will meter the ultimate customer, the EV owner, and how he would deal with a park space owner in that particular case, and how his business model will work in the regulatory framework and the framework which will be guidance for these ecosystem, both regulatory and as well as guidance framework, which will be guiding this entire public charging infrastructure. So basically, it aims at fair metering for park point, charge point owner, and parking space owner and EV customer, as well as ensuring safety and scale of economy. Then in apartments, how the electrification connection would be given apartments or private spaces where a pool of parking spaces are available, how the park base would be electrified. And independent household, which is more or less a simplified case, how electrification would be given and what are the regulatory requirements for the same. Next slide. So in the outline of the approach paper, we actually are defining what is the parkway used case, private and both private and public. Then we also define the power connectivity. So from the distribution transformer till the utility meter, and then how it is distributed to various connecting points, and the technical specifications of the parkway. So there are various regulators. We need to align the technical specification of incoming distribution supply, but more or less the charge point is up to maximum of 22 kilowatt. Then types of configurations. So there are 3 configurations which we will talk about in the next slide. So then coming to the communication between EV and EVSE, there are both conductive and wireless communications which we are defining. And also communication is there to the backend also, which also is being defined, which is aligned to the panel 5's activity. Then there is a local server and centralized server configuration, which we will be stating again, although it is specified in OCPP 1.6. Then smart meter installations for especially the domestic distribution points. Then stakeholders, we are defining stakeholders and their roles in the parkway. Then constructional requirements. So here we are also taking up the constructional requirements which CharIN has been defining in Europe. So we are trying to align the constructional requirements of parkway and the parking space according to the requirements which is floated by CharIN in an Indian context. Then characteristics of mechanical switching devices for reconfiguring the socket internally. And then it also touches upon the regulatory aspects of tariff and billing, the intent being fair metering for both the parkway owner and the end customer. Then smart power sharing. So right now in India, the number of charge points or number of outlet points are multiplied by the maximum power outlet, which is sorry. So which is just multiplied to get the sizing of the distribution transformer which is required there. So there are some deviations required in this particular case, and dynamic power sharing to make sure that the connected load will never be exceeded is another requirements which we are bringing in parkway, EV parkway. Next slide, please. So the key stakeholders who are getting connected in the standardization process here is the distribution companies, EVSE manufacturers. So EVSEs will have fair metering provisions, basically, apart from the other provisions, and what are the inlets and outlets which they should comply to, and what are the communication which they need to comply to. Then charge point operator. So what is his role while interacting with the other stakeholders in the ecosystem, and how his business model can evolve. Then network service providers. So how it will actually be interconnected in the backend. The parkway owner, basically who is actually having the ownership of the parkway, what are his requirements and obligation to make sure that the electrification is safe and successful. Next. Next slide, please. So while discussing the scope of the parkway standardization, we have talked about a few configurations. So the configuration one is giving 22 kilowatt AC output, which is 32 amps 3-phase. So it's a simple type 2 outlet with basic communication, or the PLC according to ISO, sorry, IEC 15118. So it's also adopted into IS 15118. So it is just simple type 2 charging with PLC or PWM, as the case may be. So that is the configuration one, which is familiar and which is widely accepted in the panel, that yes, we should go ahead with this type of AC EVSE. The configuration 2 is that we need to have an infrastructure socket which is common, and on that basis, how to enable up to 22 kilowatt power connectivity to the electric vehicles. So DC connection, we are having CCS and CHAdeMO provision, so which is also defined in IS 17017-1. So now CHAdeMO Association is taking up the CHAdeMO portion of interconnectivity between the AC EVSE and the CHAdeMO connector through a AC to DC appliance. Similarly, we would like to have an effort from the CharIN community to have this appliance defined, so that most of the vehicles which are upcoming in India would be with CCS connectors, and hence we need to have this appliance available in the parkway, and their regulations and guidance has to be given in the parkway standardization process. So this appliance has to be defined for CCS connectors also. Then a configuration 3, which is under proposal stage, is the infrastructure socket looks the same type 2, but in DD configuration with PLC communication at the back end or to the vehicle side, and only one type of communication, and dynamically it actually figures out whether it is AC communication. Yes.
3 minutes. Can you close it in 3 minutes? Thanks.
Yeah. Sure. So there is a AC to DC converter inside the configuration, and it reconfigures dynamically and provides for AC or DC. Next slide. Next and last slide. Next slide, please.
You see it now? Yeah.
This is the place where we want a specific intervention from the CharIN community, where in configuration 2 there is a AC EVSE with PLC or PWM connection available from AC-DC converter appliance. We should have a CCS connectivity available to the vehicles, as most of the vehicles which would come to parkway will be with CCS connectivity. So the scope of this study should be to identify the safety related issues, communication between EVSE and EV, and communication between EVSE and backend, and power connection to CCS card. So basically these are the aspects which we need to cover in the entire process. Thank you.
Thank you, Srija. Srija, we don't have a lot of time now, but I do have some questions, and the audience can also ask the questions. We will take it up definitely in the Q&A session along with the panel, but at that point we'll put this slide up and we'll discuss that. Is that okay?
Okay, sure, fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Srija. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Jörg Heuer from Ecogy to talk about making the CCS charging infrastructure professionally. That's the title of the slide. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thanks, Sivam, for having me here and the invitation and introduction. So I think it has been quite a complete picture Srija provides on the charging infrastructure side. And of course, when we talk about electric mobility, this will only happen if we take care of both sides, on the vehicle side, but as also on the infrastructure side. And here, I think we are leaving, let's say, the early adopter market, and the market becomes more and more professional. So the question is how we actually also enable to build charging infrastructure in a professional way. So let me first put a little bit spot on what can be understood on making or creating a market which becomes more and more professional. And I would like to use for that looking back to the beginning of this century on the mobile phone market. So next slide. So if we think of how that one started, so being part of that business kind of 20 years ago, we worked on actually mobile phones, very much focusing on the phone functionality as such. And so the early devices, if you remember, were really spot on, have a good audio quality and so on, and making this communication work. But we also realized the more the market gets professional, people were thinking, hey, how does this device now integrate in infrastructure and business processes around? And it's no secret, if you know, look nowadays how these kind of devices are used, they are highly integrated, whatever business is around those devices. Yeah, so whether that's payment, whether that's logistic processes, and so on. And I think you just saw also what is around this charging infrastructure by the presentation from Srija. So what we see, if you look back now in the past 8 years in EV adoption, EV charging, we saw a lot of devices which started like the mobile phone area before the smartphones came up, which basically focus, hey, this device is providing charging functionality, and basically that's it. However, we see the same trend as you saw in professionalization of the market in the communication, now also in this charging infrastructure. So where actually those businesses adopting charging infrastructure ask, hey, how is this charging infrastructure integrating in my business or even driving my business setup? And there you can think of retail, you can think of fleets, whether that's buses, whether that's ride sharing. And so there's a lot more now in that beside just looking at the electricity and how charging works. So this is what we would call a professionalization of a market. And now taking my hat on as a speaker communication also for CharIN, I have to say we looked already in the past 4 or 5 years a lot on these extra functionality. And colleagues came up, next slide please, then with the so-called step model also in CharIN, how this kind of professionalization of the market can also be supported by the standards. So it's no longer that the standards purely look only, hey, how is this interface looking like for energy transfer, but actually how to put it in context. And you see then in this step model, you know, how different industries are supported or different integration of business processes are supported, whether that's with respect to fleet operation, with retail, with home management system, you name it. And these are indications how this market starts to change and actually adopt electric mobility in their business processes. That's, I think, important to look at. And that you also see when you go for the tenders. So next slide. On the right side, if you look at the tenders in the market, it's no longer that in the early adopter market, it said, hey, can I have a charger with the functionality to charge? No, this market access is no longer the hurdle. Now, the tenders are always about, are you competitive in pricing? And are you serving my business needs in integration into my business processes, whether that's for the grid operation, grid integration, whether that's for the fleet operation in the disposition systems, or whether that's for the retail, how to integrate it in a customer journey. However, what we see quite often, and I think that's also quite a lot of questions we get in a CharIN, but also as a company like Ecogy, is how does this fit with my own strategy to build now charging infrastructure, to build chargers, develop chargers? What we often see, and that's kind of the first generation of chargers and companies, that they are starting like from scratch. So they're spending a lot of R&D budget on making the basic CCS functionality work. Yeah, and this is not rarely the case that they spend more than 50–60% of their R&D budget on this, let's say, basic functionality. And on the other hand side, those triggers actually in now where the market is already ahead, you know, putting out tenders which are quite competitive in pricing, the amount you're spending in your R&D budget to really do this design to cost effort, or even to think of how can we leverage and drive the revenue via customer service, is quite limited compared to this basic CCS functionality. But this is kind of, let's say, the first phase. We are already further down the road. So the question is, next slide, please, how can we get this R&D budget down with respect to the basic CCS functionality? And one of the lessons we learned from the market is basically socialize the cost. What does this mean? Okay, let's take again this example of the past mobile phone business. Yeah, next slide. So probably there you would ask the question, would you actually re-implement something like an internet protocol, so the IP protocol, to develop a new mobile phone? Hey, that's really a strange question, right? So no one would actually consider that. Next slide. Even you know, the big brands like Apple, like Samsung and so on, that's non-discussions anymore, because they learned, okay, creating professional products is not care about not customer differentiating features like IP protocols, audio codecs, and so on. This is something they are taking as part of professional tooling from the market, but don't do it by themselves. And they focus on what makes it different. Yeah. So next slide. What does this mean for building chargers actually? Well, why should you do the mistake to really re-implement CCS side charge to develop a new charger? Yeah, it would be like Apple doing their own audio codec, which is no longer the case. Yeah, and this is exactly what is about socializing of costs. So when you go with the basic functionality, make use of the CCS ecosystem. Don't do everything from scratch, because this will not be efficient making use of your R&D resources and would not adapt to the market, how they are now developing. So what does it mean to use the CCS ecosystem? Really step back and think, okay, what is actually the benefit, what has been created via the standardization, via CharIN for the market? It's to harmonize and enable component manufacturers to create this professional market approach with the basic CCS functionality. Next slide, please. So take a look what has been developed now in the past 5, 6, 7 years as an ecosystem around CCS. So they are quite tremendous. And I have to say, when we reviewed this also as someone participating in this ecosystem, it was really amazing to see how how many converters now have been developed for these kind of applications. Internationally, we see even more than 25 power converter manufacturers who are providing their solutions here to the market. The same is, I think, more and more true if you think of CCS cable manufacturers, or even, which was kind of often a question about the power line communication. Even in the chip markets, we have now 3 PLC chips in the market in the competition, which really eases a fast adoption of solutions. Now, based on national regulations, we even now see that more and more DC meters approach to the markets. The same is the case for safety equipment like the isolation monitors. So it's really a broad ecosystem building up here. And this is basically going week by week around this CCS part. And that is also, I can tell about EcoG as a company. So we are contributing to this ecosystem, not on a hardware component, but on the software side to provide what we call the operating system. So everything what is kind of a software component in the CCS charger. Next slide, please. And so let's take this as an example of one of these components, how this helps to professionalize actually the market. So with EcoG OS, we are providing something which is covering all software and automation features of a CCS charging station, but that's only on focusing on, let's say, this charging functionality. So compare it to the phone, it will provide you all these, let's say, base layer functionality like audio codecs, like network connectivity, and so on. It's important to understand that then still you can focus on things like design to cost, like making your charger in functionality wise a unique product. So sometimes we call it this sugar layer on top. And our the offer of our component, beside the others in the market, is then that we are providing all integrated development tools to make that fast and easy, and you can do then this development quite agile. So we are providing something like a starter kit, so that taking all the components in from this ecosystem, you have a working CCS charger from day number 1 for your development, and can focus on what effect you can push to the market with design to cost, with your functionality, how this charging infrastructure can be integrated into the revenue driving aspects for retail, for fleet management, you name it. So why is that? Spend with your R&D budget, focus on the elements which are mattering, and start with components from the ecosystem as part of the starter kit full power to make this development happen. And by that, next slide, please, you're basically adapting to the needs of the market. So you speed up with your initial setup of a CCS station. So make the market access simple, taking benefit of the CCS ecosystem, and focus where it competes in the market, where you can make and drive the revenue for your customers. So in competitive pricing by doing design to cost. And this is actually the new perspective, and you saw this quite complex surrounding of charging infrastructure, and where you can make it different in the market to focus also on the customer services, because here this is a new game to make really charging infrastructure work for those who are actually placing charging infrastructure in public. Yeah, so hopefully this gives you an insight where to start to use the CCS ecosystem. Don't start from scratch, and focus with your R&D budget to really address the correct pain points and revenue drivers in the market. Thank you very much, and looking forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Jörg. We will take the question. We already have some questions specific to you, but we will take them in the Q&A session immediately after the next presentation. Thank you. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Dinagar from TVS Motors to talk about fast charging requirements for 2-3 wheelers. Dr. Dinagar, the floor is yours. Please, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone and good morning to people in Europe. And so this is a short, there's no presentation. I'm going to just talk about the requirements and the two-wheeler, three-wheeler space from the Indian perspective. And whenever we talk about any business opportunity in the charging system or charging space, as we call it, and I see two-wheeler, three-wheeler is the place to go because that's where the scale is in India. The previous speaker from EcoG talked about the scale opportunities. They exist in the two-wheeler space in India simply because we are close to cell phone numbers in an automobile world. And worldwide, the two-wheeler industry made close to 35 million vehicles, even during the pandemic year, last year. And India, we shrank to 16 million from our peak of 22 million vehicles a year. Three-wheeler, we are about a million vehicles in a typical time. Last year was less, much less because of the pandemic. So we are talking about an industry, even in India, something like 23, 25 million vehicles, slowly going to be made into electric. Government's vision is to have at the earliest, but the customer acquiring it voluntarily and the number of products and the scale being available is going to take time. So the companies are working. Every company has invested a lot in the product development space, in the area of charging and understanding the battery technology, what it means to these customers. So let me talk about the industry scale is very clear. So we will have at some point, whether it is 25 onwards or 2030 onwards, we will have massive adaptation of electric vehicles in the space of two and three wheelers. At some point, maybe in the next 10 years time, we should have this market predominantly talking electric and at least the new vehicles. And they are going to be supported by an ecosystem to push the energy into the vehicle. And this requires a massive effort from everybody. And from a point of view of energy which is need to be put into the vehicle, we do have an electric vehicle. We have run some three-wheelers. We have collected a lot of data on those vehicles. The most of the two-wheeler needs are met by a charger at home in a small, humble half a kilowatt charger. And these vehicles are charged. These vehicles are typically in India. The power of the petrol vehicle engines which are powering them is about 6 to 8 kilowatt range. Most of the high volume vehicles in the two-wheeler space, and about the same in the three-wheeler space. We are talking about maybe the average of 7 to 10 kilowatt in three-wheeler, 6 to 8 kilowatt in the two-wheeler space. So they can kind of overlap. If you have a 7 to 8 kilowatt peak power, most of the needs are met. And you want to take the maximum speed of operation for a two-wheeler. Even a 4 to 5 kilowatt peak power should be sufficient to go there to the peak speed of 80, 90 kilometers, which is the speed at which these vehicles operate, the gasoline equivalents. So that's a target number. Now, considering these, the battery packs, typically what we need to meet a typical range where customer is not very anxious about his daily commute is about 100 kilometers. The government mandates 80 kilometers. Any vehicle around 100 is sufficient. We have seen the data from customer vehicles. Many companies have published it. Is about typically 25, 30 kilometers. Few customers going up to 40 kilometers a day. Otherwise, typically it is 20, 30 kilometers a day. So that means a vehicle with 100 kilometers will last for 3 days. They charge at home almost every day religiously with their small charger like we do with our cell phones. And that's sufficient for them. Now, where do CharIN come in and moving the energy faster come in? There are two angles to the business. One is the Government of India's initiative on the solar initiatives, what we are pushing for. The Government of India's mandate is very different from the way automotive sees it. They have massive solar installations going on, and we will be one of the largest solar-powered electricity during the daytime in India in the next 5-6 years. We should have close to 150, 160, depending on the numbers where we source from, gigawatt hour of solar electricity available during the daytime. Now, this need a place to go in very fast into usable energy. Automotive and two-wheeler is a prime target. Need to go into the vehicle quite fast. And so this is where these problems come into automotive. The government focus is to bring the energy into automotive. and without mentioning the charger. So that's where I see an opportunity for CharIN and the industry to work together to create solutions. So the opportunity lies in moving the energy fast. Why automotive industries are interested in moving the energy fast? The government is interested in moving the energy fast because they have massive amount of energy during the peak of sunlight, and they can't be stored. They have no capacity to store so much of energy. They need to quickly move into vehicles. And for them, the moving fast, so many vehicles in a day, daytime charging is the fastest way to move them, not with the slow charges, what we are comfortable, our customers today are comfortable. And from a manufacturer's perspective, the biggest challenge to adaptation is the sticker price. And the sticker price in a two-wheeler is the battery. In every electric vehicle, it is a battery, but in a two-wheeler, the cost of batteries is really going into beyond the 50% margins typically of a material cost, bill of materials of a vehicle. So we have this challenge of 100 kilometers, and we have the data of customer use of 20, 30 kilometers a day or 40 kilometers a day. And if at all a customer using 40 kilometers per trip and a return trip of 80 kilometers, today in the current vehicles of 100 kilometers he can meet, he will buy it. But we bring in the government's push of electricity into the vehicle by a fast charging system. In this case, when we use the word fast is a misnomer. It doesn't even qualify to be slow in terms of a real four-wheeled automobile where most of the CharIN customers are, and CharIN technology is at this point. When we say fast in two-wheeler spec, we are talking about a 2 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt charges. We are trying to push in something like equivalent of 1.5 kilowatt hour of energy into a battery pack during a daytime parking in office space or parking lots in the metro station or bus stops, wherever he finds a socket. The electricity is going to be very cheap. Government may repeatedly told it's almost going to be free of cost, except for the cost of carrying the energy to the endpoint. If we have a system to push this energy into the vehicle, that's what means fast charging for us. Moving 2 kilowatt energy in about an hour's time is good enough for most of these millions of vehicles, including three-wheelers, because between a trip of 100 kilometers or 80 kilometers, they can charge again, go for another trip. If the auto stands, what we call them, in the waiting areas of railway stations and bus stops and metro stations, three-wheelers can be charged. So we have a need for a faster movement of energy from a grid into the vehicle through a device. Now we come up with the CharIN. Shivam has been talking to me for quite some time. I've met CharIN in Europe in the UAV conferences. Very enamored by their system, very nice, very rugged, well tested and proven. As the previous speaker said, don't fiddle around with the proven systems. They are proven, use it and get a commercial advantage. Unfortunately, in three-wheeler and two-wheelers in India, everything is the price play. We sell these vehicles at a retail of $1,500, battery electric two-wheelers, motorcycles and scooters, and where the government taxes around 20%, 25%, all the taxes and variety of ways we pay. And so that leaves us with close to $1,000. Now, if you take profits and product development costs and everything, out of that, we are looking at something like $800 a material cost. Now we bring CCS, very nice. It is CCS system, DC, AC, PLC. I saw there are 3 vendors for PLC chipsets. I have been in touch with some of them, and many of them are very close to us in many other projects. So we are constantly in touch. But when we bring this number and talk about our material cost of a vehicle, including battery pack, including motor, including controller, a vehicle doesn't lack anything compared to any vehicle of electric vehicle. Whether Nissan Leaf, we list the parts, or a Tesla, we can write equivalent parts in a small size. Maybe it is 1/10 the size, but does the same function. We do have a very nice, powerful, intelligent controller for the vehicle, and a motor controller with all the regenerative, with this minuscule energy what we acquire in a lightweight vehicle, 150 kilo weight vehicle. Anything about 15 kilometers, we acquire the energy back into the battery without wasting them. Our batteries have a sleep current of microamperes because we don't want to have a standby current loss. We have a very intelligent startup and shutdown systems to save these energies. We have clusters which are shut down very nicely. We have a telematic which has a very nice energy management system to conserve even that pulse of telematic data which goes out of the vehicle is measured. Like a typical cell phone designer, we struggle because we have very little of cost to add batteries in these vehicles, costing $800 to $900 material. So where PLC and CCS and their connector, their system, if I have a product material cost of $20,000, yes, I can look at them. Now for us, they are no go. So the opportunity is there of moving energy fast. Now we are looking at a swappable systems. People are smart to think, remove the battery, cost comes down. It doesn't go down. It goes to another company's name. It sits in another place. And with the same challenges, moving energy into the battery fast in the swapping station, not in a charging state, fast charger into a vehicle. But the challenges are the same. There is a connector which will go through multiple cycles, need to withstand in a swappable battery compared to a cheap connector, which I can permanently fix even with a nut and bolt in a two-wheeler. That cost I need to pay because it's swappable. So everywhere when we look at these systems, we need a smart system. So now when we look at CharIN as a partner to develop such a system, they now don't exist in the world. I'm part of IEC, Srija is part of IEC. We recently attended the TC69 plenary. Everybody leaves two-wheeler industry because it's not a problem for Europe, not a problem for many of the North American market or any big mature industrial markets. And we don't have enough money to share with partners of connector suppliers and the PLC chip suppliers. So we need a solution which is unique to India. When we look at these solutions, I've been talking to Shivam for quite some time. What do we do? So we have two costs of moving energy. I will still hold that analogy. I have an energy from government available at a very low cost and available in multiple places. I have a vehicle which needs the energy to be moved in a few seconds, if not possible minutes, into them for the customer to make the next trip, into the three-wheeler to get the next customer home. So we need this system to be agile and move energy quickly at a lowest cost. I will put those numbers in front for us to think about it. We are looking at a cost target of about $100, $150 for a fast charger in a two-wheeler segment. It's about 2 kilowatt per rating and has a single phase 15 ampere socket, which is an Indian high current so-called socket available in the multiple places, even in domestic. Now I need a connector solution which moves this energy very fast into the vehicle. I like to have PLC, I'd like to have a CAN, dual CAN, triple CAN, whatever is possible, but they're all expensive. And we would like to have a system which has only two pins. We don't want to, I would love to have your DC pins, what you use, 8 mm diameter pins, what you use in your CCS, and nothing more. So we have 2 pins, which is not polarity defined. It can be swapped electronically, you decide the polarity. And you have an entire communication wireless, entire protocol wireless. So when we look at, I saw the recent biggest phone company in the world talking about a AirTag with the ultra wide band. I was thrilled to see why not ultra wide band. And you bring your charging connector close by, already the communication protocol exchange, everything is over the vehicle. The charger knows what type of vehicle, what the current needs, what the SOC type of battery, max current, the ramp of the current, and the vehicle knows what is the charger and what is the capacity available, how much it can pull. And so the entire protocol is ready, be it in swapping, this is possible. So you have 2 pins to transfer energy. We are not talking about wireless energy travel, wired pinned transfer, 2 pins. Orientation free, it can be a concentric pins, like one of the leading swapping companies, or it can be one center pin with 4 circular pins for the other terminal. I saw it one of the connector companies in India. So the entire communication protocol moves to wireless. So I would like CharIN to look at it, help us defining this without losing the safety, without losing any of the massive advantages, move the entire communication between the battery, between the charger and the vehicle in case of a wired charging, and in case of a swappable system between the battery and the swapping station with a similar connector. The connector remaining is same. So there is an opportunity for a connector company, whether in India, in Europe, with the CharIN help or without CharIN help, we need a simple connector which doesn't carry these complex communication pins, which will get destroyed in a two-wheeler swappable settings, and a protocol which is well validated, well within CharIN's help ecosystem to help us out in India to develop. As a company, we are very much willing, as a group in BAS and the panels we work in are very much willing. We couldn't hear it in TC69, we couldn't hear it in any other place because it is a challenge to develop massive amount of engineering, put in the connector, put in the communication, make them, validate them, create ecosystem to validate such a system. So we are willing to look at it. So this is what I thought I will share. So there is an opportunity of millions of vehicles, hundreds of millions of vehicles in a span of 10 years you will have, and battery packs which is swapped across the country with the same technology, same connector, same wireless protocol, all following what the famous CCS is doing for electrification in Europe today. Would like to work with this challenge, leave the thought with you, and look at your reactions. We'll see what we can do together. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, sir. That was helpful in terms of defining what kind of energy you're looking at and all that stuff. Sir, without much ado, I'd like to go over to the panel discussion. I'd like, next slide, please. So, Satish sir will not be joining us, but can I request the others to switch on their cameras? Marius, can I request you also to join?
Yes, for sure. I should be. Oh,
okay.
Wait. No, it should work.
Okay, so for let me start off with Marius on this. You had mentioned PHEVs and EVs on a kind of a similar footing as far as Germany is concerned. Here I see that hybrids are generally in India considered differently from EVs. What is your thought on whether the incentives and everything should be extended to PHEVs along with EVs in India? I just want your thoughts on why it should be done or why it should not be done. Your impressions, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Sivam, for this question. I think for us, what made the success of the electric mobility ramp up in Germany right now was, on the one hand, the environmental bonus by the German government, which was for plug-in hybrids and battery electric, like 100% battery electric cars. For the VHEVs, it was a little bit higher as for the PHEVs, but we think that like the PHEV technology, it's a very, very good technology, especially if you combine city mobility and the landscape mobility, let's say. And we, as the VDA, still see it as an important bridge technology for the next at least 10, 15 years. Very important is that also, like we forecast a future share of 30% still for the plug-in hybrid electric cars. And what we said at the beginning, that it's really important to get the customer on the ground, to get the customer inspired by electric mobility. And we think that sometimes the constraints for just purchasing a 100% electric vehicle car, there is constraints. The customer has constraints and thinks, oh my God, where can I charge it? And how will this work? Will I be happy with an electric car? And the plug-in hybrid is a very good start into this technology, because you know that you can drive sometimes, I don't know, 70, 80 kilometers just electric. And so we think that's on the one hand important to really get the attention of the customer for electric car, and on the other hand to have it as a very important bridge technology. Therefore, we would also encourage the Indian government to include some in the FAME Scheme 2 incentivization scheme, the plug-in hybrids as well. I hope this somehow answers your question. And maybe just if I like we still have in Germany, we have a very distinct share. Like it's 51% plug-in hybrid and 49%. 51% battery electric and 49% plug-in hybrid. So we see that it's still 50-50 right now.
Understood. Thank you. I have a question. I can probably, let me see if I can put this to Srija. The question is this: what are the proportion of vehicles which really need 1000-volt DCS output from DC charger? The reason for this question is that the cost of power electronic components increase vastly when this voltage needs to be supported. Now, I know this is not a part B question, but as an OEM, are you ever going to look at 1000 volts in the next 5-6 years? Maybe if you can come to that answer, maybe I can just answer the audience's question.
Yeah. So for right now, the focus of four-wheeler industry, like passenger segment and commercial segment, is at 400 volt. So now in future, we also are looking into 800 volt systems, because it actually reduces the copper content. So in effect, and it brings us a lot of benefit in terms of the weight and weight in the vehicle and the cost, ultimate cost. So insulation becomes similar to 400 volt system because it's all in the same class, because 200 to 1000 class in safety is the same. So safety wise it is the same, but your copper content reduces. So we are looking into that and seriously working on it. Okay. So in future, so when we are considering the charging infrastructure, so it should be up to 1000 volt.
Understood.
So that's Siva, maybe even to back up what has been said there. I think we see the same on the infrastructure side. So I referenced quite this CCS ecosystem with the different converter manufacturers. And there, as of today, you already see that roughly 50% already have switching topology to support the 1000 volt. Yeah, and so this is already taking place, and I would say they came up with designs where the cost difference is no longer that big because they have switching topologies in, so that they can drive higher currents with a lower voltage, and they are switching topology inside the converter when they need to support the higher voltage. And from the sustainability perspective, completely, I would back up what has been said. It's really, you are saving basically copper. So it's a good option to do, especially for the commercial vehicle area. Yeah.
Okay, so in that case, let me ask a follow-up to you, Jörg. Do you see the heavy-duty market, for instance, going above 1000 volt? Or is 1000 a good number for infrastructure? Because infrastructure doesn't change for a decade.
Yeah, you know that there are CharIN activities to go above the 1000 volt and even about higher rates. And I would, for that market, separate the commercial vehicle market in those which are more logistic in big cities compared to intercity traffic. Yeah, and so if you think of that, quite a substantial use of commercial vehicles are inside cities, and there you have more the ranges, maybe per day 200, 300 kilometers. There I would expect that the current 1000 volt solution, so 800 volt is a typical nominal voltage there, is quite sufficient and doing a lot of the deal. And so we are looking more now above 1000 volt if it comes to this intercity commercial vehicle traffic, and there that's then the next step, I would say. Yeah, but I would not say in principle that will happen for commercial vehicles. It really depends for what the commercial vehicles are used.
Understood. Thank you, Jörg. Srija, to add your answer. So is it correct to assume that you see passenger vehicles also coming into the 800 volt range in the next 5 years? I'm not asking specific questions to Mahindra, but I'm saying, is this something that you see happening in the Indian market? 800 volt system.
Yeah, it is.
So then, okay, so then I guess the charger voltage of 1000 as a threshold should be fine. I have a question to Jörg now. What are the growth outlook for Indian DC charging, fast charging manufacturers who are adopting CCS? What are the growth outlooks for them to enter the international market for the next 5 years? Now you are an enabler. You allow a lot of charging companies to develop their products, and then they get into different markets. So where do you see the scope for Indian companies?
Well, first of all, I think it's interesting to see that also this market now is more and more internationalizing. And when we started these activities also internationally 10 years ago, we had in standardization this running gag saying, hey, the most global industry, which is the automotive industry, meets the most regional industry, which is basically the electricity industry, right? So this has been quite a challenge in standardization to bring these very different domains together. And now what we see more and more is that for charging, even though this is infrastructure, so electrical installation side, that this becomes quite international. So I think that's an excellent perspective actually for whomever is contributing to the CCS ecosystem, that is no longer something local to the market. So we are learning on an international scale here how to serve best this very important, let's say, change from from gas-driven mobility to electric-driven mobility, and electricity then moving more and more, what has been said also via Jarvis, to really coming out of renewable sources. Yeah, and therefore this integration is important. And I think whoever takes part in this ecosystem, we are not discussing that any longer for particular regional markets. Yeah. So I hope this indirectly answers your question. Yeah.
No, it does, I think. Thank you. Dr. Dinagar, this question is for you, sir, from the audience. What is the energy content requirement for a 2/3-wheeler? And that's the full of the question, but maybe it changes over the years.
So,
battery cost, please, it's up to you.
Yeah, so typically, if you take a benchmark of 100cc vehicles equivalent, where the top speed is about 80-85 kilometers, and typically, as I said, today's customer acceptance is about 100 kilometers range, and anything beyond that is they see it as a huge gain, and anything lower than that, they think there is a risk. Even if you give slightly less, 70, 80, they kind of worry about it. So 100 is a number which today they accept. They're not really in usages. We don't see it. So which is about 2.5 kilowatt hour today's energy efficiency of typical our systems, unless you have some additional components in the drivetrain which are inefficient. But otherwise, typically you should have 2 kilowatt hour to 2.5 kilowatt hour of usable energy, depending on the company's drivetrain architecture, and to get you about 100 kilometers of range. Meets the needs of today. It also meets the power needs of the acceleration requirements, which is connected in a way when you operate with the small battery packs, because you tend to operate with a 3 to 4 kilowatt motor to accelerate like a regular gasoline driven vehicle. You can't get that acceleration if you make the battery quite low, because your discharge currents will unreasonably high for a battery size and number of parallel cells, whatever you have. So we are looking at these numbers. So we are looking at 2 to 2.5 kilowatt hour. If you look at a fast charging option, I would look at a 2 kilowatt charger to push this energy in about 30-40 minutes, whatever is the best possible way. They are uncooled cells, so we need to be careful how do we handle that. And so this is a two-wheeler option. When you look at three-wheeler, we are looking at something like power is very close to similar number, around 7 kilowatt. You can say that 7 to 8 kilowatt is a power requirement, peak power. Average power of say 6 kilowatts, slightly higher than a two-wheeler. The pain in a three-wheeler is it's a very bulky vehicle. Whatever way you'd make it lighter, with the passengers, 3 passengers and a driver, they themselves are close to 300 kilos, and the vehicle weight being anything not less than 200 kilos, you are looking at half a ton vehicle. Now, to accelerate half a ton of mass, you need simply a massive current, even with the 8 kilowatt with enough ratios. So you are getting into a battery size which is decided by the current, not decided by basically the range. So your discharge current, like what I talked about in two-wheeler, decides the battery size. So you end up pushing the battery size what just it can take this discharge current without getting hooked up in the chemistry. So we are looking at numbers somewhere around 5-6 kilowatt hour, depending on the cell chemistry and the type and the cooling requirements and their life expectancy in Indian summer of 45 degrees. And and they also need to have a quick turnaround. We can't ask a driver to charge for 8 hours middle of the day. He has nowhere to go. So you need to push in enough energy. So we are looking at numbers which are able to do something like at least 0.8C, 0.7C charging capability in them. So which we push a little bit size. So I'm looking at a 6 kilowatt should be good enough to survive both gradability or an acceleration requirement as well as a range of 100 kilometers. And so we are looking about 2 to 2.5 kilowatt for a two-wheeler, and 3 of them, 2 to 3 of them for a three-wheeler. Let me put it like that. So it kind of answers swappable ecosystem kind of models also.
So then I have a follow-up question on that. Now, let's take the commercial market and the private market separately. Assuming that the battery cost comes down, okay, would you look at a larger battery size, given that financially it will make sense, or would you go for higher power charging? Which would you look at for commercial and private?
Two-wheeler, even if you give it for $10 a kilowatt hour, I have very little space between the legs. They sit in between my legs in a motorcycle. Below me and the road clearance is the battery in a scooter. So I have very little of space. If you take a liters of volume, it's pretty low volume space in two-wheeler. And we struggle to package in many cases even DC-DC converter, which is nothing great, 150 watt to 200 watt DC-DC converter. We look around the vehicle where to hide them. We have literally no space to hide these parts of even that size. So two-wheeler is very unique. Even if it is cheap, I can't keep them. We need energy density. If you can give me 1 kg battery holding something like 1 kg, 1 liter battery holding some 3-4 kilowatt hour, I'm very happy. Now, if you give me an energy density, what it is today, but cheaper at $50, I'm greedy, but my current vehicle envelope, which gives the nimbleness to drive, two-wheeler is fun part of driving also. An youngster drives in the home, including his parents. But the fun of driving is banking a vehicle. You have a ton of battery, you bank, and you tend to struggle to lift the vehicle back. You kind of see an CG playing tricks with you. So driving a two-wheeler has this fun element, so we don't want to compromise it in any way. The customers enjoy it. They buy, a lot of them buy it for the reason. So we can't accommodate big batteries in two-wheeler. I don't see anything beyond 3 kilowatt hour going in a motorcycle or scooter. If somebody smartly, I tried once packaging a 10 kilowatt hour battery pack. I don't know why I did that, but I tried to package it, and it's like sitting on top of an elephant. You know what it means in India. It's an unmanageable vehicle. It's unreasonable, unmanageable, uncomfortable vehicle. Just to prove a point, you can do that. But we don't have an energy density today to match that.
Understood. Would you look at the commercial market separately? Three-wheelers specifically?
Yeah, commercial market in two-wheeler. Yeah, commercial market in two-wheeler is the same. Two-wheelers will be scooters, will be taxis one day, but so we leave that with the same constraints. Three-wheeler, we have a lot of space, ton of space, because we have space below the driver's seat, passenger seat, and the engine compartment. We have huge space. Actually, I can package even 15 kilowatt hour battery pack, and like a small car, what Srija may be knowing, I can put the entire floorboard on a three-wheeler as a battery pack, covering up to something like 10 kilowatt hour, 12 kilowatt hour battery packs. Possible in a three-wheeler, but the customer can't afford it. The entire business model is acquisition cost of a vehicle. He is currently paying 150,000 rupees. And if you make him pay for whatever trick you do, swapping, non-swapping, fast charging, slow charging, and ask him to pay 250,000 to 400,000 rupees, which is what it will cost for a bigger size battery, his business model is out, and he's out of business, and he can't run this vehicle, make any money out of it. He can keep it as a showcase, and we can make a vehicle, but it is not saleable. So you need to be close to 200,000 rupees. 200,000 rupees, whatever battery you can afford. Yeah, here the cheaper batteries are good, but you need to turn around very fast between trips, charge fast and quick turnaround between trips. So he need to have a fast charging capability. So that poses a challenge.
Understood. Done, sir. Sir, one final question to you. We are running out of time, but I do have questions for all of you actually. So let me just close with your question to you. I mean, what is the issue that you have with fast charging? Is it about the footprint, or is it about the thermal management of the cells, or is it about vendor availability? What prevents you from doing fast charging right now? And what is it that you would want?
Yeah, the problem is CharIN and the connector, guys. So if both of them give me a connector and a protocol, wired, wireless, everything put together for about $10, I'm ready to go today. There is no problem on thermal, no problem on cooling. We all have smart BMS which knows what to do with the charging currents, and we communicate on both sides to make sure the current is manageable, thermally manageable. I've done fast charging at 45 degrees. It's not a problem. With Rajasthan summer, not going beyond that. So we can do fast charging. The problem is the cost. So I can't afford a connector, anything which is beyond $7-8. I can't afford anybody selling me an IC beyond $3. That's what I would pay for my CAN device. That's what I would like to pay for a protocol converter, whether it is PLC, non-PLC, wired, wireless. So I'm looking at all my vehicles have Bluetooth. So my wondering is, why not Bluetooth be a protocol exchange system? Or after seeing the AirTags, why not the ultra wideband chip being the protocol exchange system, or an NFC which is used in some of the cards for entry? All our banking cards are an NFC, which is very secure. We believe our money with that. why not use that to exchange information between the charging gun and the vehicle and the battery pack and the charging stopping station. So I look at wireless as an opportunity, kill the pins which are unreliable, undependable, costly for a two-wheeler. And so this is the thought process. This is my personal thought process. I don't know what is right. Today we don't have a solution. It's simply because too expensive. And we don't have real estate in two-wheeler to hide such a fancy thing. I saw a bike in Europe with a full CCS DC charging capability. It's nice. They're half the size of my petrol tank today. So, and to bend the wire underneath, I will be scared to keep that wire and bend it underneath the vehicle to take it to my battery pack. We don't use anything beyond 4 millimeter, 5 millimeter square wires. So we have challenges which are very unique. And so we aim for parts which are hindrance to us as not acceptable. We don't use many of the four-wheeler parts even in our petrol vehicle system parts. They use the part for 10 euros they buy, we buy for half a euro. We laugh at them, we do the same function of engine position sensing, but they are very happy buying a part with ground isolated, pole shoe isolated speed sensors for 80 euros, $8. We pay for half a euro. We are very happy. Our engines run at 12,000 RPM, their engine doesn't cross 5,000. So they're all the systems we create for two-wheelers in India. We will create something for Indian two-wheelers, electric two-wheelers for fast charging if somebody doesn't help us. So that's the direction.
I got your point, sir. Thank you. I have one question for you from the audience. The question is this: the biggest challenge for DC fast charging manufacturer during development stage is the cost of the EV simulator, especially the PLC communication part in CCS standard. Finally, the cost of R&D gets added to the final product cost. Are there any low-cost EV simulator designs which can be offered from EcoG, except for the load power supply? To you.
Yeah, okay, thanks for forwarding the question. Yes, exactly, that's also one portion of this professionalization, I would say. Yeah, so if I take it now my EcoG hat on, what we do is, and these are basically two portions of an answer. So the first one is, our business is not to do test equipment like others. Yeah, so I think in the past 5 years we have seen those companies specializing on certain test equipment. Our business is to make this CCS ecosystem happen from a operating system perspective. And our IDE, just free of costs, brings in a CharDemo test emulation vehicle, brings in a CCS emulated vehicle. You can parameterize that, whether you go with DIN or ISO. And this is just to make this environment professional, right? So, I mean, again, going back to the mobile phone example, yeah, nowadays the smartphones are a lot more complex than the mobile phones 10 years back. But it's easy to build them because you get all these toolings around for those companies who are interested to bring this into market, and EcoG belongs to those. And so with our OS, you get all these emulators of PCS and CharDemo. And in addition, because this is now so crucial in these times that you can distribute and develop that stuff, we are not only emulating the vehicle side, we actually also emulate the whole hardware and circuit control of the charger itself, so that those companies adding, their services on top can do that with a controller on the desk, emulate the hardware of the charger and emulate the vehicle. And this is really speeding up this agile development. And this is not at the cost of the development. It's really to bring this in the market, because that's our interest, right? To scale it.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, does that answer hopefully the question?
I hope so. But even otherwise, we have your contact details, which will be circulated as part of the presentation. So
people colleagues can to reach out.
Shrija, this question is for you. I have a two-part question from different people in the audience. Is the AC-DC converter 22 kilowatt acting as an appliance, not part of the EVSE charger? Does it act as a dispenser with CCS and CharDemo port kept near the EVSE charger? This is the first one. I'll give you the second afterwards.
Yeah. So the appliance which I have mentioned in configuration 2 is a movable appliance which gets connected to the infrastructure socket. So which is AC socket. So it can be moved around the parking bay, and the vehicle which is coming with CCS can get connected to the CCS plug. So that is the point.
Understood. Next question to you is, what is the specification of the LEV AC and LEV DC chargers, power rating and communication? Would these chargers be suitable for public charging stations? Perhaps you would like to clarify
part of it already has been answered by Dr. Dinagar. So, but anyway, the AC charger, as per the standardization perspective, is up to 3.3 kilowatt single phase, and for the DC charging, as Dr. Dinagar was mentioning, it is up to 7 kilowatt, which it is being defined for.
Okay, so this question was specifically for you. So, I mean, the audience member wanted your points on this, so that's why I'm asking you this. Okay.
Yeah. So no problem. It is already answered by Dr. Dinagar, and he's part of panel 2.
Okay, let me see if I'm missing any other questions. Yeah, there is one question. I'll throw it open to the board, to the panel. If a fast charger DC having power line communication conforms and has certifications for IEC 61851-23, would it automatically be qualified to equivalent IS standards? I'll throw it open to anyone who wants to answer.
So yes, so it is dash 23 is yet to get published. The thing is that automatically gets qualified if in case it is CCS and CHAdeMO, but not GBT yet. So that is the condition. Yeah.
Understood.
I have answered that.
It has. Thank you. My last question for the panel discussion is to Marius. Marius, you're working with a lot of companies at ACMA. Now, there are over 800 companies in ACMA. A lot of them are looking at e-mobility. Now, what would you recommend as a suggestion for them to actually increase their, speed up their development process? Is there something that you would suggest in terms of, say, technology transfer or anything else from the VDA side? It's a general question.
Thank you very much.
We have ACMA members registered, so let me ask this.
Yes, thank you very much, Sivam. It's a very interesting question, as we in VDA have the suppliers and the manufacturers as well. So different model than SIAM and ACMA, and we always try to keep them as close as possible and to align them together with various event formats, various exhibitions, and so on. So that's also a model which runs very, very good in India, and I would recommend that all the suppliers also very close keep in touch with the OEMs to see where the market is leading. And as India in the future wants to become also an export hub, I would recommend maybe not focus on India for the development or for the market at the end, but also try to focus on to have a global approach directly. So not only stay in your home country, also go abroad. And then it's very important, as we see that also the component manufacturers think about global standardization and how this can be supported. And all, I must say, between our VDA collaboration with ECMA and SIAM, we have done various ideas for exchanges, various events where I think the ties between Germany and India, also when it comes to electric mobility, have been grown very good, and we are looking forward for the future exchanges.
Thank you, Marius. We conclude the panel with this. Thank you all for joining for the panel. Can we have the next slide, please? Aryan? Okay, the next slide is anyway me giving the closing words. So let me give the closing words. Thank you all for joining today. I know that pretty much everyone in India is distracted. We have a pandemic which seems to be out of control. Friends, family members, some of them are affected. We extend our prayers to all of you. Thank you for joining. I hope this panel and the speeches were helpful for you. And if you'd like to get any more information, we have the speakers' contact details there in the presentation, which will be shared to all of you. Thank you all. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.